Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Garner, and I want to thank you all for coming today to our financial wellness class. This particular class is something near and dear to my heart on college planning. I've got a senior right now who's going to be going to college in August, and I've got a 12-year-old that we're going to be planning for soon. So this is the perfect timing for me. And this was a topic that we had requests for, and I'm so very thankful for Brad Little and his team at Voya because he's really helped us out with all of our financial wellness classes. And so for you who have not been to our classes before, they're on the internet on the Healthy Heights website, so you can go out there. We're videotaping all of these classes, so the slides are out there, there's some tools out there, and there are some presentations out there from classes that we did last year. I can't remember how many classes we've done so far, but we've got some great classes out there on budgeting, managing your debt, retirement, Social Security, all sorts of stuff. So Voya and Brad have been instrumental in helping us kick off this financial wellness program over the last year. John Acuna is our coordinator for Healthy Heights, and she would tell you if she was up here that we are trying to focus on wellness in a much broader way. So we're not just looking at physical fitness, if you will, as part of our wellness plan. We've got mental health, financial wellness, all sorts of other components in our wellness program this year. So keep your eyes open for reminders about future classes, and be sure and check out those links on the Healthy Heights website and share those with your coworkers. I want to remind you before I sit down that you do have an evaluation form, and we love to hear what you have to say about these classes. So before you leave, make sure you fill out that form and get it to Jonna when you leave. There's a spot on there for topics, future topics that you think might be important, and all of our classes have been developed from your feedback. So if you have ideas for classes related to financial issues, please feel free to put that on your comment form, because we really do look at that, study that. We sit down and we meet and we talk about what information might be useful to you, things like insurance or retirement, investments, anything. So just put it down on there, and we'll get together as we're developing our class schedule for the next year, or we might add some classes during this year. But we've got a lineup of classes already scheduled. So next month we've got a class on helpful tax tips. So it's tax time. We thought February would be a great time to sit down and talk about those deductions that you might not think about, or things that you might need to be aware of when you're gathering information for your tax return. So that class is coming up in February. I'm going to sit down and be quiet now, and I'm going to turn it over to Brad Little, who I mentioned is with Voya. He's been working with our organization a very long time, and you probably already know him. But once again, I just want to thank Brad for all the work that he's done in helping us with our financial wellness class. Please give a round of applause for Brad Little. Thanks, Brad. Oh, what did I just do?
If we can get our screen back up, did we hit something, guys? There we go. Thank you. So welcome everybody. Good morning. We're going to take 30 minutes or so to talk about college planning. It's actually a topic that we could spend hours upon hours on. It can be quite complex. We're going to focus on just a couple of ways to save for retirement, even though there are multiple ways to do so. As Amy said, this is part of our financial wellness program here for West Tennessee Healthcare. Whenever you see that logo in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen above the Voya logo, that's the financial wellness logo that's a part of Healthy Heights. And so whenever you see that, you can know that the session you're going to attend or what you're about to read is related to the financial wellness program through West Tennessee Healthcare. This is we're starting our second year. This is our first seminar for our second season, as I'd like to call it. And so we're really excited about everything coming up this year. We have I'm assuming all that's been published and put out in terms of what's coming up. I'm not sure, but we'll check with John and make sure that's communicated out to the employees so that you can kind of get on the calendar what you want to hear about. But saving for college was probably one of the number one topics that we heard about and got feedback from employees in the last season. So we're going to talk about that today and be thinking of questions that you have. I'd like to make this somewhat informal, and if you think of something as we go through this as a question, we're probably going to address it through the slides today, but if we don't, think of what that might be and feel free to shout that out or let me know that you have a question as we go through the seminar today. So I'll start with this. Number one, how many of you have children? Raise your hand if you have children. Okay, so everybody basically has kids. How many of you have children under age 10? Anybody have children under age 10? Okay, very good. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of slides that's going to scare you to death. And a lot of times it takes fear in order to help you to take action. So let's look at what college costs look like today, okay? So if we have a private, nonprofit, 4-year, in your own campus school, the estimated cost for the 2015-2016 school year is about $47,000, almost $48,000. That's per year. Now that does include room and board, books, supplies, transportation, fees, and other expenses. So today, you could expect to spend about $47,000 to $48,000. That's 1 year. I'm not talking about all 4 years. That's 1 year. You can multiply times 4 to get that number. Obviously, that is quite scary and it's quite a lot. If you look at a private school like that, might be a Brigham Young or a Cornell or Duke or Harvard or something, some kind of school like that. If you talk about a public school, so these are going to be primarily our state schools, and if you're out of state, you're looking at about $38,000 per year. If you talk about a public school and you're in-state, your own campus, $24,000 a year. And if you take a public 2-year school, maybe a Dyersburg State or a Jackson State, just as an example, you're looking at about $16,000 or $17,000 per year. So when you have children, no matter really what their age is, the younger the better, just like in retirement, the earlier you start, the better, right? The same thing applies and the same concept applies when it comes to saving for college. The earlier the better, but it's really never too late to start. These are big expenses, and if you want to put your children through or your grandchildren through college, it takes a lot of money, and the earlier you can begin saving for that, the better. So if we fast forward the tape just a little bit, and I'll read this aloud, I think this is important. Based on historical data, tuition and fees may increase 3% to 5% annually. By 2033, which is about, 16 years or so from now, the average cost of tuition and fees, now the prior screen was counting in books and room and board and all that information. This page does not. So this is a minimum number here. But for 4 years, the average cost in 2003 for a private college could be as high as $324,000 for those 4 years. Again, that's just tuition and fees. And so it's very important to begin preparing for that, just like you do for retirement or you do maybe for a wedding or whatever. This is a big cost, and it's something that's important to begin saving for. And you can see the $95,000 for an in-state public college. But again, and I stress, that's a base cost. It doesn't include room and board and books and other expenses. So when I think about these numbers and I see this $324,000, the next thing that pops into my mind is this next slide. Babies. These are my babies that were born here, and thank you guys for taking care of us. We are certainly appreciative of that. The upper left-hand corner, that's my little girl, Rowan, when she was a few months old, I guess, and that's baby Ben there. He was 5 months old in that picture. You can tell because my wife does the little sticker deal. Well, today they are 7 and 4, and you see them on the right-hand side. And so when I look at them, I just see a big debt that I'm going to have to come up with about $1 million in about 15 or 16 years to cover their expenses. Well, being in the financial services industry and knowing how important it is to save for college, as soon as I had their Social Security numbers, which you know takes several weeks after birth, as soon as we got that in the mail, I set up college accounts for both of them. And I've been putting in, and I don't put in a lot, I think I put 50 in a month per month through a bank draft into a college account for both of them. And I think today, and I don't mind sharing this with you, I think today the total value of those two accounts is $17,000. Is it enough? It is not. But it's $16,000 or $17,000 that's designated for them that I have put back for them since their birth. Okay? So let's talk about what are the vehicles that are out there that are available for you to use to save for college. There are several. And there are pros and cons to each of them. And if we tried to go over all of these today, we'd be here for 2 hours. You would be bored to death, and you would lose interest very, very quickly if we tried to go through all of these. And I have worked on all of these. I've been in this industry for 18 years, so I know most of them very, very well. We're going to focus today on the 529 plan, and I'll tell you about the others very briefly, but we're going to focus on that one because it is the easiest to work on. It is the most convenient. It is the most flexible, and it is the most popular. The other, or I'd say the top three, are subject to a lot of limitations. They're subject to income limits. They're subject to contribution limits, and a lot of those things and those restrictions do not apply to 529 plans. So the Coverdell ESA, that is formerly known as an education IRA. Some folks like the idea of using a Roth IRA for college expenses. It's not my favorite thing to do. Roth IRAs, to me, should really be designated for retirement. They can be used for education, but I don't think it gives you a lot of benefit for that. You may have heard of an UGMA or an UTMA. Those are assets that are in the child's name. The problem with that account, that type of account, is that when the child turns age of majority, the child gets control of the money. Well, I don't know a lot of 18-year-olds that are great money managers, and I'm afraid that my 18-year-old would take that money that was all of a sudden became available to them and go and buy a Corvette instead of going to college. So those are not my favorite accounts either, but there are some reasons why you might want that. And then a taxable account is just maybe a brokerage account or even a savings account. Occasionally we'll have somebody call us and they'll say, look, my child is 16 or 17. I've just gotten a late start. I haven't had the opportunity to save for retirement. I'd really like to save for the next year or two. What type of vehicle should I use? In most cases, I say, you need to go to the bank and you need to put it in the savings account. We really don't have enough time to look at a real long investment strategy for that type of money. So if you're looking at using the money in the next 6 months or year and a half because you have an older child, a 529 plan or some of these other vehicles may not be the best to use. And I'll say, put it in a savings account. Let's be safe with it. You're going to need it very, very soon. But if you're saving for a senior year in college, and we've got 4 or 5 years, then it might make sense to use one of these other vehicles. But today, we're going to focus on the 529 plan because, again, it's the one we use most often in the investment business. We passed out a couple of brochures there. That is the Voya 529 plan. You do not have to use that, but it was easiest for me to print those. I have greatest access to those. But it gives you some facts about how 529 plans are going to work, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And I just wanted to let you have that literature. You can use any financial advisor to go to, and they can write any 529 plan with any fund family. I just happen to give you the proprietary one, but I don't necessarily always use that one. But I thought the literature was good and wanted you to see some of the facts so you'd have that in writing. So first of all, let's define this. What is a 529 plan? Well, it is obviously a plan that is designated to save for college expenses. Here we go. 529 plans are sponsored by states, and those pictures of those states mean nothing. I just put that on there to be cute. But they're sponsored by states. About 38 to 40 states sponsor 529 plans. And most 529 plans are issued by mutual fund families. So Fidelity, Oppenheimer, T. Rowe Price, just a few examples. The Voya Mutual Fund that we passed out, the Voya funds, is a fund family that sponsors a state 529 plan. And so they all have cutesy names, okay? So for instance, the New Mexico plan is underwritten by Oppenheimer, which is a fund family, and you see that one in the middle, and it's called Scholar's Edge, and it's all about marketing. That's the brand. It's called Scholar's Edge. It's by New Mexico. It's issued by Oppenheimer. Rhode Island, which is probably one of the first states to ever do this in the late 90s, is underwritten by Invesco. You may have heard of Invesco. It's called College Bound Fund. So when I first got in this business in 98, 99, and 529 plans had just come out, that's about the only one that was available. So we wrote a number of those with the Rhode Island plan. Alaska and Maryland both use T. Rowe Price. Wisconsin is the one I passed out to you. That's the Voya Funds plan. It's called Tomorrow Scholar. It's all cute. It's all cute marketing names. But the point is that they all work the same way, and the rules are really all the same way, all the same. The question comes up, well, if I choose the New Mexico plan, and it's with Oppenheimer, and I choose the Scholar's Edge plan, does my child have to go to school in New Mexico? I don't want my child to go to school in New Mexico, and the answer is no. It doesn't really matter which state and which plan you pick. Now, if we lived in a state that gave you an income tax credit, some states will give you tax credits by participating in that state's plan. So if you lived in New Mexico and made contributions to the New Mexico plan, New Mexico may give you state tax credits for that. Well, Tennessee doesn't have that. We do have a 529 plan here, and you can use the state of Tennessee plan, but you're not going to get any kind of state income tax credits for that. So the point is, it doesn't matter which plan you use. You just want to pick a fund family or an investment option that you feel comfortable with. The ones we use most often out of our office, we'll use the Voya plan occasionally, the one I passed out to you. We'll use New Mexico a lot. The one I have for my children is the Oppenheimer Funds Scholar's Edge program, just because I kind of like the funds and how they've performed. But all the rules are the same. They really work the same way, okay? And it depends on what's important to you. Is the return important or expenses important? We have to take a look at that and think about that. But you don't have to go to school in the state in which that plan is written. It really doesn't matter whatsoever. So what are the advantages of contributing to a 529 plan? And this slide is important. Here's the deal, and it works a lot like a Roth IRA in that the growth and the earnings and the withdrawals are federally income tax-free if they're used for qualified education expenses. So let's say that over time you put in $10,000 and that $10,000 grows to $100,000 and your child is ready to go to school. You can use that entire $100,000 and not pay taxes on any of that growth. So we put in 10, it's grown to $100,000. We have $90,000 worth of growth in that account, and you get to use any and all of that without paying taxes on anything as long as it's used for qualified education expenses. So what are the qualified education expenses? Well, honestly, it's just about anything that you can think of as it relates to college. Tuition, room and board, fees, supplies, equipment, even including computers. If you had to buy a microscope that was for some type of biology class and you had to buy that and purchase that, you could use 529 plan assets for that microscope and not pay taxes on anything. I've never seen a school turn down this money, and we've been doing this a long time. You can use it on just about anything you can think of. If you can make it fit in the college box in some form or fashion, you can make it work. Any 2- and 4-year schools, tech schools, vo-tech schools, graduate schools, if you're going to use it for a master's degree or a doctorate, all of that is fine. And there's some schools overseas that you can also use this money for. So that's the advantage of using it for college. So let's talk about how it works a little bit. Number one, and this is why I like the flexibility of 529 plans. They can be made or can be put into place for anyone, by anyone, with very high maximums, very low minimums, and no income restrictions. Like some of those other plans that I mentioned earlier, the Coverdell ESA or a Roth IRA. There are income restrictions there. If you make too much money, you can't contribute to those plans. With a 529 plan, it doesn't matter how much money you make or how little you make, you can put money into a 529 plan. Your income doesn't matter. You're not restricted. Low minimums into these accounts. If you wanted to start with $25 a month, there's no problem with that. You can do that the majority of the time. Most folks do bank draft for these accounts. You turn in a voided check, and we do $25 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever you feel comfortable with. A question we get often here, is it payroll deduction for hospital employees? We don't have that in place here. We've never really approached the hospital about that. Maybe it's something we need to look at in the future, but currently it's not a payroll deduction plan. This is something you would do independently and on your own. And high maximums, that's important. The maxes on these plans, it differs by state, but it's traditionally in the range of $350,000 to $450,000 per child over the life of that account. So in other words, if you had a child, you can't put more than about $400,000 into that account over the life of that account. Well, that's a high number, and I don't know many people who are going to sock away $400,000 into a 529 plan. If you're doing $50 a month, you're going to be fine. You're not going to get to $400,000. It's okay. I like that. It's flexible. High maximums, low minimums, no income restrictions. Doesn't matter what you make. So there are three terms when it comes to 529 plans that we need to define in order to continue our conversation today. Number one is we're going to talk about the beneficiary. So when you hear the term beneficiary, we often think of death. So when we talk about retirement plans and we ask you to name your beneficiary, we're talking about if something happens to you. In the 529 world, that's not the case. The beneficiary is the person whom the money is designated to be used for, who is often going to be a child. Doesn't have to be a child, but it most often is a child. That is the beneficiary. The person in control is the owner, likely a parent or a grandparent. Now, if my best friend had a baby and I wanted to set up a 529 plan for my best friend's child, I could do that. I'm still the owner of the account. So whoever the adult is the owner of the assets. We're going to talk about what that means and how important that is in a minute. And the person who takes over control in the event of the owner's death is the successor owner. So what we often find is that the wife may be the owner, the husband is the successor owner, the child is the beneficiary. And that's how it is with my two 529 plans. I have an account for my daughter. I'm the owner. My wife is the successor owner. My little girl is the beneficiary. For my son, I'm the owner. My wife is the successor owner, and my son is the beneficiary. So those are the three terms you'll hear us use as we continue through this presentation today. We get this question quite a bit, and I'll tell you this. What if I don't have a child, but I'm planning on having a child? Or what if I'm pregnant and I want to start an account? Well, in order to have or start a 529 plan and open an account, you have to have a Social Security number for your child. But the cool thing about 520, and you wouldn't have that if you're pregnant, you don't have that yet, right? But the cool thing about 529 plans is that you can always change the beneficiary. So what I would do if I really wanted to start planning well in advance, and I don't know many people that have done this, but let's say I plan on having children in 5 years, but I want to go ahead and start saving for college, I would open up a 529 plan. I'm going to be the owner. I'm going to name myself as the beneficiary. So I'm going to use these assets like I'm going to go back to school. But then when my child is born, I change the beneficiary to my child. So there are some ways to save really, really early if you wanted to. You have to be at least 18 to be an owner, by the way. So as long as you're 18, you can open a 529 plan. So it really goes to our next slide here. Does the beneficiary ever gain control? A lot of folks worry about that, and I mentioned that earlier with the UGMA-UTMA accounts, because once the child reaches age of majority, 18 or 21, then the child gains control of those assets. That's not the case with 529 plans. It doesn't matter how old the child is, even if the child is 40, the child never gains control of the assets. They're always in control of the owner. So the parents always have control of the money. I think that's important. But the owner can change the beneficiary at any time, and the owner can even change the owner. Again, a lot of flexibility. So that begs the next question. So what do you think when we work on 529 plans and college plans, what do you think our number one question is about our children when it comes to college? What if what? What if they don't go to college? Or what if they get a full ride? All of our children are geniuses. My baby's a genius. They're going to get a full ride. I'm not going to have to worry about it. I'm glad I'm saving for this money, but he's going to get a full scholarship. What if my child doesn't go to college? So remember, back to the slide previously, the owner always maintains control. So what you would do in that case is the beneficiary could be changed to the next child or to anyone else in the family. So if my daughter gets a full ride and doesn't need that money or doesn't go to school for some reason, then I can simply change the beneficiary on that account to my son, and now my son has two accounts to pull from to save for college. You can change it to anyone else in the family. It doesn't matter. Let's say that you have two children, neither one of them go to school, but you know that your children are going to have children. Well, you can save those accounts, and when your grandchildren are born, you simply change the beneficiary to your grandchild, and now you've given this money to be designated for a grandchild. As long as you change it to anybody that you're related to in some capacity, the law allows you to do that, and I think that's pretty neat. Okay? Any questions so far about that? Pretty flexible, pretty easy. Okay. Well, the next question that often comes up is, what if I decide I'm the owner and I decide not to use this for qualified education expenses? And we've had that happen with some customers before. They've gotten to a bind. You know, their child may only be 10, but they've called and they said, I've got some medical expenses, or I've got the car's broken down. I've got to tap into this. I don't have any other resources. Can you do that? Yes, you're the owner. You control the money. But if you don't use it for qualified education expenses, you're going to have to pay federal taxes on the earnings, not what you put in, because what you put in has already been taxed. That came out of your bank account. That's after-tax dollars. But anything that it's earned that you take out and you don't use for qualified education expenses, you're going to be taxed on the earnings, and there's going to be a 10% IRS penalty on the earnings, and it's the earnings only, okay? So keep that in mind. This really needs to be designated for college. If you're trying to save for multiple things, and you know, maybe you're going to buy a boat, maybe you're going to use it for college, you know, and you're not sure, this may not be the best vehicle. If you're looking for just a college account and you're dedicated to that and it's designated for that, this is a good vehicle to do that in, okay? Let's talk about financial aid just for a moment. I will preface this with, I am not a financial aid expert. And I don't pretend to be. I have not been through that except when I was in school. That was a long time ago. But I will tell you that, remember, 529 plan assets are considered those of the owner, which is often the parent. And when it comes to financial aid, the parental assets are weighted lower than the assets of the child. So one way to take the assets off the books of a parent when you're applying for financial aid is you simply make the grandparents, perhaps, the owner of the account, and then they're not considered a part of the assets of the family or of the parents. But these are parental assets, not child assets. So it does help a little bit in that regard. Okay, any questions so far? And I've tried to make this very simple today. Those are the basic rules of 529 plans. It's tax-free growth for education. Just like a Roth IRA or Roth 403B is tax-free growth for retirement, this is tax-free growth for education expenses, but it's for college. A question that comes up quite a bit is, can I use this for secondary school? Can I use this for private school? My child's going to go to Trinity or USJ or Jackson Christian, for example. Can I use it for that? You cannot. It has to be used for college only. Now, the Coverdell ESAs that I mentioned earlier, they can be used for college and secondary schools. But we're just talking about college today, and 529 plans, I believe, are the best at that. So obviously, if you decide to get one started, you need a few things, right? You're going to need, of course, you're going to be the owner, so you're going to need your name and your social security number and your date of birth and your address and all of that. You're going to need the same information for the beneficiary, for the child. You're going to need the child's date of birth, their address, their social security number. You're going to know all of that and have that information. But then you have to decide, much like a retirement plan, how am I going to invest these dollars? Because this is an investment account. A 529 plan is an investment vehicle. How am I going to invest the money in the plan? And I'm going to show you this, but this is really not an investment seminar. I didn't want to make it that today. I really wanted to give you education about the product and how the plan actually works. So I will go over briefly how the investments work in a 529 plan. And it doesn't matter which plan you choose and which state you choose and which fund family you choose. They all have the same investment choices. They may be managed by different people. One may be managed by Fidelity. One may be managed by T. Rowe Price or Oppenheimer or Voya or Vanguard or whatever. But the investment choices all work the same way. And it's going to be one of three things. You're either going to have an age-based fund, a risk-based fund, or you have the individual funds. The one that we use 99.9% of the time are going to be the age-based funds. These are my favorite. These are target date funds based on when the child is likely to use the money or go to school. So in the retirement world, we use age-based funds quite a bit based on a retirement date. But normally in retirement, we have a lot more time to save. We might have 30 or 40 years if you're in your 20s or 30s. But with college, and we have a newborn baby, how much time do we have? Not long. We've got 18 years, 18 to 20 years. So we often used age-based funds for that reason. It allows you to put everything in one fund based on the age of your child, and as your child gets older, that particular fund gets more and more conservative over time. The younger your child, the more aggressive or more moderate that fund is. And as time goes on, and as the child gets older and closer to needing and wanting the money for school, the account and the fund gets safer and safer and safer over time. So by the time you get to age 18, that account is going to be fairly conservative. Why? We want it to be conservative at that time because it's time for us to use the money. We don't want to deal with a lot of volatility and a lot of market fluctuations. I'll go back to the example I used a minute ago. Let's say that I don't have children or I'm pregnant and I want to set up an account. And if I name myself as the beneficiary and I put an age-based fund in there, well, it's going to make me real conservative because I'm well past normal college age, right? So what I would do is if I was going to open it up and name myself as the beneficiary, but I'm really doing it for my child who's not born yet, I would just pick an individual fund, or I'd pick a risk-based fund, an aggressive fund, that's going to stay static. So there are some other reasons why we might use a risk-based fund or an individual fund, but 99% of the time, we're going to be dealing with parents who have children that are under age 10 or 11, and we're going to use an age-based fund. Well, your 2-year-old and your 8-year-old are going to be invested in different funds. One's going to be a little bit more aggressive than the other because your 2-year-old has a lot more time than your 8-year-old. So we often use the age-based funds in 529 plans, and they're going to be found in all of them. And they all work the same way. And you can always change it too. I've had that happen a few times. I remember back in 2008 and 2009 when we had set funds up, several years earlier. We had some clients that really started to worry when the stock market was going nuts. Of course, we were worried about our retirement plans too, but folks were worried about these, and some customers elected to make some changes and make them more conservative. Not probably the best move. We tried to talk them out of that, but you have to do what makes you feel comfortable, and you can always do that. So very flexible in the ability to make changes there. So that's how they work. We did some definitions today on beneficiary and owner and successor owner. Talked about how much you can put in and how that's done, traditionally bank draft, and you can write checks as well. Another thing I just remembered is that you can have multiple drafts going into the same account. So let's say you, the parent, set up the account for your child, but your parents, the grandparents, they would also like to set up a draft going into that. So you're going to do $25 a month out of your checking account, but your father wants to do $25 a month as well coming out of his checking account. So you can have multiple drafts going into that same account for that particular child or that particular beneficiary. Okay, so our final slide today, and then we'll take some questions if there are any, is going to be, what are the costs? What do 529 plans cost? Well, it depends. It depends on whether you want to do it on your own or you want to work with an advisor. I will tell you up front that if you go online and do it on your own, and so you go directly to Fidelity or you go directly to Oppenheimer online or T. Rowe Price or Voya online, it's going to be cheaper because you're cutting out an advisor. And so therefore, it's going to be cheaper in cost. If you work with an advisor, you're going to have to deal with and absorb what are known as sales charges. And it doesn't matter what firm you work with, whether it's our firm or Edward Jones or Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch. It doesn't matter. They're going to have sales charges within those products, where that when the money goes in, you're going to pay some upfront cost with each contribution. Well, in return for that, if it's of value to you, you get service with that advisor that you're working with. That all you got to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, I want to increase what I'm putting in, or hey, my child's ready to go to school, I need $5,000. That advisor would help you with all that, versus if you do it on your own, you're going to be doing it online, or you're going to do it with an 800 number, but it is cheaper that way. So that's up to you on how you want to set it up, whether you want to do it on your own or if you want to work with a professional. So that's the overview today. Again, I wanted to try to keep it light and try to keep it simple. I think 529 plans are easy and are the best. If you're trying to save for college, it's a very, very good vehicle to do that. Can you think of any questions so far? Amy, co-chair Amy.
A lot of schools will require a student to purchase a meal plan if they live on campus. Do you know if that's considered a qualified expense or not?
I believe it is, but I think if you go to irs.gov, I believe there is a whole list of what is approved. I've never seen anything that's not approved. And I will tell you this, I'm not sure who's checking that, quite frankly, because when you file your income tax returns, it's not required that you turn in documentation to the IRS for what you use the money for. So when you request the withdrawal, let's say you request $5,000, you're going to have to tell the fund company, so the Fidelity or whoever, they're going to ask you, is it qualified or is it not qualified? If it's qualified, then they're going to send you a check, and you're going to deposit it and write checks to that. And then you're going to tell your tax person, I use that $5,000 for qualified education expenses. The IRS doesn't ask. So I'm not sure it matters, but I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying if you got audited by the IRS, then they're going to ask for that documentation, but you don't have to provide it when you file your income tax returns. I don't think there's any problem with that. I'm sure it's approved. It's a good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
We currently have 529 plans on our children, but I was interested in the grandparent scenario because we had grandparents interested in contributing and the possible protection from the impact on financial aid. Is it conceivable to change ownership of those 529 plans?
It is. It is. You can change the owner of that.
Okay, so we could switch it to a grandparent.
Since you're the owner, you have control of ownership. And you shouldn't have any trouble with that. You want to check with that vendor or that fund family. They probably have a form. They're going to have a transaction form to do that. Yeah. Should be fairly easy. And we've changed some ownership before on accounts, so we've had that happen. Okay, that's a good question. Any other questions? Nothing else? Well, I hope this was beneficial to you. I hope you hopefully learned a little bit of something. Did you have a question? How soon you can start using the money? Once it's in there? Immediately. Now, you want to be careful about some of the expenses. There are different sales charges, and then depending on what share class you may have purchased, there are some sales classes or some fund shares that would charge you on the back end to take money out if it's taken out within the first year. But if it was set up correctly, you wouldn't be in that. If you knew you were going to use it in the next couple of years, you would be in the proper share class that wouldn't charge you on the back end. But that's the only thing you'd want to check for. But there are no time requirements there that it has to be in there for 2 years or anything like that. You can start using it immediately. You can put it in and take it right back out. That's not a problem. And federally income tax free as long as it's qualified. Okay.
Just do like for birthdays and Christmas and that kind of thing, or both?
Both. So we try to encourage people to do something on a monthly basis on a bank draft. That gets into the investment world a little bit. It's dollar cost averaging into the investments. In the early days when we used to set these up, folks would say, look, I'm going to do $1,000 every year. I'm just going to write you a check. So they'd write us a check that first day, and we wouldn't see those people again for about 5 or 6 years. So I think it's better to do something systematically and then just add money when you can. And a lot of these companies will waive maintenance fees. A lot of these accounts will have like a $25 a year annual maintenance fee. But if you do a bank draft, they'll waive that. Just because they know that most people will write one check and they don't ever do it again. So we try to encourage people to do the bank draft, and then when you have some extra cash, write a check when you can. Allow grandparents to write checks into it. Anybody can contribute. So I try to do both. But the bank draft, I think, is important because it keeps you consistent and it keeps you dedicated and on track, and you just kind of set it and forget it. And try to increase it when you can. I have not changed my children since they were born. I'm doing the same amount, and I need to increase that. I haven't taken time to do it. So try to increase it when you can. Jonna, did you have a question?
Is there a gauge on how you know it, especially if you start young, at age 10, where we need to be in contributing, or is there an amount where we would like to be around?
Well, there are a lot of calculators online. I think even on that sheet, it may send you to a link to look at, what the value may be. And those calculators are all over the place. And the same works for retirement. If I'm doing $25 a month, what is it going to be worth in 10 years if I earn 6%? It's pretty simple calculators. They're everywhere. But in terms of whether you're on track or not, the problem with that is it depends on where your child goes to school. And you remember from that slide, that first slide, there's a big difference between a Jackson State and Cornell in terms of the cost. So if you kind of knew that you wanted because you went to Knoxville and you want your child to be a Vol, and that's what you want it to be, you could always back into that formula to see where you are. So, but I think you got to know what your end game is going to be. Same in retirement. If I know I want my account to be worth $1 million at retirement, we can tell you what you got to be contributing on a monthly basis or per paycheck to make it work. But we got to know where you're going. I don't think you can have too much. It's kind of like in retirement. I don't think you can have too much money. And if you're doing what most people do, $25, $50, $100 a month, that's probably not even enough ultimately. But you hope that this is a subsidy, right? You hope that your child gets half scholarship, and this just helps with some of those expenses. You hope you're not out of pocket for everything. Very good questions. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So if you start one of these accounts, and say you end up having 2 kids, the first kid gets a lot of scholarship, so you change it down to the second kid, they end up getting a lot of scholarship, so you have these 2 accounts. You can use it for whatever, it's just kind of taxed a little bit more heavy.
Right. So if for some reason you have these 2 accounts in your case and you don't really need them or for college, and you want to use them for something else, other than qualified education expenses, yes, you can always take the money out, but you're going to be taxed on the earnings, just the earnings, and you're going to be penalized by the IRS 10% because you took it out to buy a car, or something like that. So although you can do that, what we would probably encourage you to do is if you don't have to do that, is to just save that money, let it continue to grow, and then name your grandchildren as the new beneficiaries. So when they're born, your grandchildren start with $100,000 for college. That's pretty cool if you can do that. So, okay. Anything else? All right. So does everybody have the evaluation forms, Jonna?
Yeah.
They do? So, we want you to fill that out. If I did a great job and you enjoyed that, put that down. If I did not, don't put that down. That's bad for the committee. No, we want your honest feedback. So be sure to tell us what you think. If you have ideas for other classes in the future, and again, we have a lot and we were asking earlier, is all of that published? The topics, where can that be found?
That's going to be on the intranet and also the external intranet on the Healthy Heights page. So if you're on the intranet, go to the bottom, Healthy Heights is on your right, click there, and then you'll find classes.
We've got, as Amy mentioned, we've got tax tips coming up. We've got retirement. We're doing a whole another deal on retirement. We've got estate planning, budgeting, long-term care, life insurance. Got a lot of good stuff coming.